Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we step quietly into the streets of London as they once were hundreds of years ago. This is not the bustling London of day, with its merchants, apprentices, and markets, but a softer city, a city where shadows stretch long across cobbled lanes, and where one humble worker makes his way from lamp to lamp, carrying the faint promise of light. It is the life of a lamplighter. So, let us walk with him slowly and gently as the night unfolds. The sun has dipped behind the rooftops of London. For a moment, the sky holds onto its colour, a thin strip of orange and rose clinging to the horizon. But soon it fades into the blue-grey of twilight. Shadows thicken, corners deepen, and the streets fall quieter. From the river comes the soft lap of water against wooden piers. Somewhere, a cart rattles over cobblestones, the horse snorting as it slows to a stop. The day is ending, and this is the moment the lamplighter begins his work. He carries with him a long wooden pole, taller than himself, with a small wick fastened at its tip. Over his shoulder is a pouch with tools, a trimming knife, a flask of oil, a rag. It is not heavy work, not dramatic work, but it is steady. Each night he walks the same streets, in the same slow rhythm, bringing light where the city would otherwise fall to darkness. He stops at the first lamp of his route. It stands tall on a wooden post, the glass pane fogged with soot from nights before. The lamplighter opens the iron latch, trims the wick with care, and adds oil from his flask. Then, with a patient motion, he leans his pole and sets the flame alight. There is a pause. The flame flickers once, twice, before catching fully, glowing warm behind the small panes of glass. The lamplighter watches it a moment, not rushing, not hurrying on. He lets the stillness of the moment settle, the first small flame against the growing dark, and then he moves on. Street by street, lamp by lamp, the city glimmers awake in patches of light. Somewhere, a baker closes his shop, sweeping flour from his doorstep. A child tugs at his mother's hand as they hurry home. The tavern door swings open, spilling laughter and the smell of ale into the street. But soon even these sounds fade, and the lamplighter is left to his quiet work. His steps echo softly on the stones. The only company, the creak of the leather strap holding his pouch and the faint clink of tools within. Each lamp becomes a small companion. He knows them by memory. Which one leans slightly, which one burns quickly, which one smokes and requires extra tending. Each has its quirks, just like people, and so his night is filled with small rituals repeated again and again. In some alleys, the lamps glow over shuttered windows, casting gentle halos against the walls. In others they shine over puddles left by the day's rain, the light rippling softly on the water's surface. The city changes with the lamps. What was once shadow becomes softened, almost kind. The lamplighter does not hurry. He walks with patience, for the night is long, and his duty is to keep pace with it. He is not a man of power, not a man of fame, but he knows the comfort his lamps bring. Travellers on the road feel safer when the street is lit. Merchants trust their goods when light stands by their doors. And families sleep easier, knowing the city glows faintly just outside. Now and then he passes the night watch, a man in a heavy cloak, lantern swinging from his hand. They nod at one another, a quiet greeting between two guardians of the night. No words are needed, only the shared understanding of their task. One tends the lamps, the other tends the streets. A cat slips by, brushing against the lamplighter's boots before disappearing into an alley. The scent of tallow oil lingers in the air, mingling with damp stone and faint smoke from distant chimneys. These are the smells of the city by night, sharp, earthy, and steady. Hours pass. The lamplighter continues his route. Some lamps are stubborn, their wicks frayed, their oil nearly gone. He trims, polishes, adjusts. Others catch quickly, burning brightly at once, eager to glow. Each act is deliberate, each motion gentle. The night deepens, the taverns grow quieter. The horses return to their stables, the streets empty, leaving only the lamplighter, his pole, and his lamps. At last, he reaches the final lamp of his round. The moon sits high now, pale and distant above the rooftops. The Thames shimmers faintly in the distance, silver under the lamplight's glow. He leans his pole one last time, kindling the flame. It catches slowly, glowing like an ember, then steady as a heartbeat. The lamplighter lingers, watching the warm circle of light spread across the cobblestones. This is the last of his duty tonight. He turns for home. Behind him, the lamps stretch into the dark, each one glowing softly like beads on a string. Together they mark his work, not grand, not loud, but essential. Silent companions of the night, the lamplighter walks slowly, his tools swaying in his pouch, his pole steady at his side. The city rests now under his quiet care, and as he disappears into the night, the lamps remain, burning gently, watching over London until dawn. The lamplighter continues along his route, though his pace is never hurried. Each corner of London offers something slightly different, something worth noticing, even in the quiet of night. Here, the stones are uneven, and his boots must find their balance on the shifting ground. There, a wooden shutter creaks faintly in the breeze, left ajar by a careless hand, and just beyond, the faint sound of a dog barking drifts through the still air, before fading into silence again. He pauses beneath one of the lamps, holding his pole upright. The flame inside wavers ever so slightly, nudged by a breeze. For a moment, he adjusts the wick and shields the lantern with his hand, making sure the flame holds steady. It is such a small act, yet there is comfort in it. A flame kept alive is more than light. It is a reassurance that the city will not be swallowed entirely by shadow. Farther down the lane, the houses press closer together, their timbered walls leaning toward one another as though sharing a secret. The lamplighter knows these streets well. He has walked them in rain and frost, in thick fog that swallowed every shape, and in summer nights when the air was heavy and still. Tonight the air is cool but not biting. A thin mist curls along the ground, softening the edges of each stone. Each step. From one open window comes the faint smell of boiled broth, left simmering on the hearth. Another house, quiet and still, smells faintly of smoke and damp wool. The lamplighter notices these things, not because they are unusual, but because they are part of the world he inhabits. He is not a man of wealth nor of books, but he knows the streets as others might know the pages of a story. Every alley has its mood, every door its history, and every lamp its place in the night. There are stretches of road where no one stirs. The only sound is his own boots on stone, steady and deliberate. The rhythm of his walk becomes almost like the ticking of a clock, each step marking time in the darkness. In these moments, he lets his thoughts wander. He thinks of the lamps he will extinguish at dawn, of the new day that will soon begin for others. He thinks of bread baking in ovens, of market stalls being set out, of apprentices yawning as they prepare for labour. His own life is bound to the lamps, to the small hours when others rest, and though the work is plain, it feels to him like a kind of stewardship, not grand, not noble, but steady. He reaches another lamp, this one standing at a crossroads. Its glass is streaked with soot, and the wick burns unevenly. The lamplighter takes more time here, trimming carefully, wiping the panes with his rag until the flame glows clearer. The crossroads now shines a little brighter, each street stretching out like a branch lit at its base. A man passes by, pulling his cloak tight against the night air. He nods once to the lamplighter, not stopping, not speaking, just a brief acknowledgement of the light's importance. Then he is gone again, his footsteps fading quickly into silence. The lamplighter moves on, deeper into the city's quiet. The taverns have emptied by now, their doors barred, their voices hushed. Only the faint smell of ale and smoke lingers in the air, a memory of noise that has already passed. At one corner he finds a discarded wooden tankard, left behind by a careless hand. He nudges it aside with his boot, listening as it rolls gently until it rests against the wall. A little farther, he hears the faint creak of a wagon, though he cannot see it. Perhaps a baker carrying flour before dawn, perhaps a farmer bringing produce in before the market wakes. Such sounds remind him that the city never truly sleeps. Even in the stillest hours, life continues quietly at its edges. Above him, clouds drift slowly across the moon, dimming its glow. The lamps below seem brighter in contrast, each flame holding its ground against the great dark. The lamplighter tilts his head to watch the clouds pass, his breath rising in pale mist. For a moment, he feels the vastness of the night around him, the endless sky above, and the fragile warmth of each lamp in his care. He lowers his gaze again, returning to his task. There is always another lamp, another flame to tend, and so he walks on, steady and unhurried, as London sleeps around him. The lamplighter turns down a narrower street now, where the houses lean closer and the lamps stand more sparsely. The cobbles here are uneven, some stones raised higher than others, worn smooth by years of passing carts. His boots find their way carefully, each step steady, each sound echoing faintly against the wooden beams of the overhanging homes. One lamp stands at the corner, its glass clouded and faint. He pauses there, placing his pole carefully against it. With practiced ease, he trims the wick, adds a splash of oil, and sparks it back to life. The flame takes slowly, curling into a steady glow. It spills across the narrow lane, reaching the doorsteps where cats sleep curled in doorways. One of them lifts its head, eyes glinting in the faint light, before settling back into slumber. This part of the city feels different, quieter, though not empty. Somewhere above, he hears the faint creak of a bed frame, the shuffle of feet across old boards. A candle flickers in a window, glowing faintly through the small panes of glass. Perhaps a mother waking to tend her child, or a man restless in his sleep. The lamplighter does not wonder too long. He knows that every household carries its own rhythms, its own unspoken patterns, and his task is simply to pass through, leaving light behind him. Farther on, he approaches one of the wider streets. Here the lamps stand taller, more evenly spaced, as though someone once planned them with care. The road is broader, enough for two carts to pass side by side. But at this hour, it is empty, only the faint outline of wheel ruts marking the way. He moves from lamp to lamp, each one sparking awake, forming a line of light that stretches down the street. The effect is quiet but grand, a corridor of glowing lanterns leading into the distance. The lamplighter pauses a moment, leaning on his pole to watch the lamps all together. They shine not brightly, not with the blaze of day, but with something gentler, like embers strung out along the road, a necklace of flame resting against the city's dark throat. From the far end of the street, he hears the soft roll of wheels. A cart approaches, drawn by a single horse. Its driver sits hunched, cloaked against the night air. As the cart passes, the lamplighter sees sacks of flour piled high, the faint dust rising with every bump of the wheels. The baker's work has begun already, though dawn is still hours away. The driver nods at him in passing, the only greeting offered before continuing into the dark. The lamplighter lifts his eyes to the next lamp and moves on. In his pouch, the flask of oil grows lighter with each use. He measures it carefully, never spilling, never wasting. The rag he carries is dark with soot, worn from nights of wiping glass panes, but still serviceable. His trimming knife rests easy in his palm, its handle smoothed from long use. These are not fine tools, not adorned or polished, but they are steady companions, as much a part of him as his own hands. They will be with him night after night, until the city changes, or his strength gives out. The hours pass. The city sinks deeper into stillness. Even the taverns are silent now, their doors bolted, their windows dark. Only the river seems alive, whispering softly at the edge of the streets, carrying with it the faint creak of moored boats shifting in the current. The lamplighter finds himself near the water. The lamps here stand shorter, their light falling across the worn planks of the docks. He listens as ropes groan against wooden posts, as the tide laps steadily, again and again, without pause. The lamps reflect in the rippling water, twin flames wavering, steady above yet restless below. He lingers here longer than usual, for the rhythm of the river feels like a companion, unhurried and timeless. When he moves away from the docks, the air changes. It carries the smell of smoke from hearth fires, of damp wool drying near embers, of horse dung and straw scattered in narrow alleys. It is not unpleasant, not surprising, simply the scent of London by night. To him it is familiar, even comforting. Each smell marks a part of the city, telling him where he is as surely as the lamps themselves. He turns into another quarter now, where workshops line the street. By day, these places would be noisy with the strike of hammers, the rasp of saws, the chatter of apprentices. But now they are silent, their doors barred, their tools resting in shadows. Only the lamps keep them company, faint light spilling across empty benches and locked shutters. He stops at one lamp, its flame guttering. The wick has burned too low, and it trembles weakly in its glass. He trims it, replaces it, adds fresh oil, and watches as the flame steadies again. The lamplighter stands a moment, admiring the way it glows against the shuttered door, as though keeping watch over the workshop's slumber. The night wears on, hour by hour, and still he walks, steady and quiet, through streets that seem endless. Each lamp he tends becomes a marker of time, a sign that his task continues as it always has. He does not count the hours, nor measure the distance. The rhythm itself is enough, the walking, the tending, the watching. The lamplighter leaves the workshops behind and follows a wider street that slopes gently upward. Here the houses grow grander. Tall facades of brick and timber rise above him, their windows larger, their doors painted in colours that catch even the faint lamplight. Iron knockers gleam faintly, polished smooth by many hands. The lamps here are more carefully tended, their posts straighter, their glass panes clearer. Still, the lamplighter does his work with the same quiet patience. He trims, oils, and kindles each flame, watching as the light spreads across the polished stones. It reflects faintly in the brass numbers fixed to each door and glimmers against the wrought iron railings that mark the wealthier homes. The street itself is hushed. Only the soft rustle of leaves from a row of trees disturbs the silence. The lamplighter pauses beneath one of them, looking up through its branches at the faint shimmer of the moon above. For a moment, the world feels still, as though the city itself is holding its breath. He walks on, moving now toward narrower alleys where the houses lean closer and the lamps burn more dimly. This quarter feels older. The timber beams are warped with age, the walls patched again and again. The smells are sharper here, damp straw, stale beer, the faint tang of smoke clinging to the air. The lamps need more care. Some are nearly empty, their oil burned low. Others have cracked panes, the glass fogged with soot. The lamplighter works slowly, patiently, giving each the attention it requires. He knows that here, where the streets are more shadowed, the lamps matter all the more. A rat scurries across the cobbles, pausing for a heartbeat before vanishing into the dark. Somewhere above, a voice murmurs in sleep, then falls silent again. The lamplighter adjusts his grip on the pole and continues, steady as ever. Now he finds himself in a small square, its centre empty, its edges lined with cottages. In the day, this place would be filled with noise, children at play, women drawing water, men calling to one another as they went about their trade. But at this hour, it is quiet. Only the lamps watch over the square, their light falling across the worn stones. He tends them one by one. At the final lamp, he rests for a moment, leaning against its post. The stillness is deep here, and he lets it settle over him. The only sound is the faint scrape of his boot on stone and the soft sigh of the flame. The night grows older still. The lamplighter can feel it in the air, the heaviness that comes before dawn, when even the night seems to tire of itself. He moves on, his work nearly done. Through one last alley he walks, where the lamps are few and far between. The houses here are small, their shutters crooked, their doors worn. Yet even here he brings the same light, the same patience. The flames catch slowly, glowing against walls that have seen many winters. He does not hurry, though the end of his route draws near. Each lamp is given its moment, each flame its place. For though the city may rise and fall, though wealth and poverty divide its streets, the lamps belong to all. Their light does not ask who passes beneath it. It simply glows. At last the lamplighter turns back toward home. Behind him, the lamps stretch in a long chain of quiet fire, each one a marker of the night's passage. The sky above has shifted, faintly but surely. The deep black has softened into a shade of blue, the very first hint of morning. The lamplighter knows that soon he will return, pole in hand, to snuff the flames one by one. But for now they burn steadily, watching over the last hours of night. He walks slowly, his steps unhurried, his tools swaying in his pouch. The city is resting, and he too will rest once his journey ends. As the lamplighter makes his way home, his thoughts wander as freely as his feet. The night has a way of stirring memory, of pulling quiet reflections from corners usually left untouched in the busyness of day. He thinks of the lamps themselves. When he first began this work, the lamps were fewer and the light more dim. The oil was thicker, the wicks more troublesome. He remembers how his hands trembled in those first weeks, afraid he would spill too much oil or trim the wick too short. But with time, the motions became natural, as steady as breathing. Now the pole feels like an extension of his arm, the trimming knife like a tool he has always known. It is strange, he reflects, how even the most ordinary things can shape a life. The lamps do not seem extraordinary, and yet, without them, the city would stumble in darkness. It is a small duty perhaps, but one he has come to know well and perhaps even cherish. The seasons shape the lamps too. In summer, when the nights are short, his work begins late and ends early. The air then is warm, sometimes heavy, with the smell of flowers carried in from gardens beyond the walls. Children linger in the streets until the last possible moment, reluctant to give in to sleep. He lights the lamps then, under skies that still glow faintly with the day, as though the sun itself resists its rest. In winter, it is different. The darkness arrives early, and it stays late. The lamps burn longer, their flames fighting the chill air. Snow sometimes falls, dusting the lamps with white, and he must wipe the glass carefully before the flame will hold. His breath hangs in the air, and his fingers grow stiff with cold, but the lamps must still be tended. And so he walks, night after night, through frost and fog, until spring finally comes again. The lamplighter remembers too the fogs of London, thick as wool, rolling through the streets until even the lamps seem swallowed. On such nights he could hardly see the flame he had just lit, though he stood only a step away. The light would glow faintly, a pale circle in the haze, and the rest would vanish into grey. On those nights the city felt like a dream, half-formed, half-hidden, a place where one might lose the way even on a familiar street. And yet he still walked, still lit, trusting that his steps would find the lamps, one after another. Sometimes, in his quieter hours, he thinks of what the city was like before the lamps. He has heard the older men speak of nights so dark that one could hardly see a hand stretched out before the face. When the moon was hidden, the streets were near invisible, and people carried their own lanterns if they dared to walk at all. Now, though the lamps are modest, the city holds a softness at night, a rhythm of faint flames that seem to breathe with the streets themselves. He wonders if, in years to come, there will be more lamps, brighter lamps, perhaps even lamps that burn without oil. But such thoughts are far away, and his concern is only with the flame before him, here and now. There are memories of his own youth too, when he walked these streets as a boy, long before he carried a pole or pouch. He recalls chasing other children through the alleys, their laughter ringing out until they were called home. Back then, the lamps seemed tall, like guardians, their flames mysterious and untouchable. He never thought he would one day be the one to tend them. Life often unfolds in ways unseen at the start, carrying one into paths not imagined. And yet here he is, the keeper of those same lamps, giving them breath each night, his steps slow as he enters another familiar lane. The lamps here burn well, steady and strong, requiring little of him tonight. He lets them be, only pausing to check the oil, to clear a pane with his rag. It is comforting to know that some tasks are easy, that not every flame resists his care. The quiet is deep now, the kind of stillness that belongs only to the last hours before dawn. The city seems wrapped in a great blanket, heavy and hushed. Even the river sounds softer, as though it too has grown drowsy. The lamplighter tilts his head, watching the faintest glow of pale grey rising at the horizon. It is not yet morning, not truly, but the promise of day rests just beyond the edge of the night. The lamps glow against it, small yet steady, holding their ground until the sun arrives to take their place. He knows his work is nearly done, though it will begin again in only a handful of hours. For now, though, the lamps burn quietly, and he walks among them, the city's silent companion. The lamplighter's boots scrape gently over the cobbles, each step carrying him farther into the hushed city. He notices the textures around him, though he does not rush to name them, only lets them pass slowly across his mind. The stones underfoot are uneven, cool and damp from the mist of the river. Some are worn smooth, polished by centuries of carts and footsteps. Others jut a little higher, their edges chipped, reminders of the countless wheels and hooves that have passed this way. The soles of his boots know these stones, just as his hands know the weight of his pole. The walls beside him lean close, built of timber and plaster. Their beams creak faintly as the air shifts. The plaster is cracked in places, rough beneath the hand. In some doorways, he sees the faint shine of iron knockers, their surfaces cold and dark. Elsewhere, the lamps catch on the pale shimmer of glass panes, warped and bubbled, each reflecting the flame in its own wavering way. He passes by one shop with a sign hanging above the door, its paint flaking but still legible. By day, the wood would be bright with letters and symbols calling to passers-by. Now, in the dim lamplight, it sways slightly in the breeze, the faint creak of rope the only sound it makes. The flame glints across the iron hooks that hold it, and the lamplighter moves on. The lamps watch over all who walk beneath them, and though the streets are mostly empty, there are always a few. A man in a heavy cloak hurries past, his boots clattering quickly as he disappears down another lane. A woman carries a basket covered with cloth, the faint smell of herbs rising from within. She nods once at the lamplighter as she passes, her face hidden beneath her hood. Later, a boy trots through the square, barefoot, carrying a bundle of kindling tied with rope. His steps are quick, his head bent, and soon he vanishes into the dark. The lamplighter does not stop them. He does not speak. He only tends his lamps, watching as they pass through the circles of light and into shadow again. Each life is separate, each journey its own, but for a moment they share the same flame. Sometimes he wonders how many stories have unfolded beneath these lamps. How many quiet meetings, how many hurried departures, how many whispered words exchanged where the light touched the stone. The lamps cannot tell, of course. They burn without judgment, without memory. They are steady companions, never asking, never telling, only giving light to whoever needs it. And yet, he thinks, if they could speak, they might tell the entire story of the city itself. The smells of the night shift as he moves. Near the baker's quarter, the faint sweetness of flour lingers in the air, though the ovens are still cold. Near the taverns, the sour tang of ale and smoke drifts from doorways now dark. Closer to the river, the air is damp, carrying the scent of wet wood, tar and brine. Each smell is part of the city, a layer in its endless tapestry. The lamplighter notices them, though without judgment, without hurry. They are simply there, as natural as the lamps he tends. At one corner, he pauses longer than usual. The lamp here leans slightly, its base set crooked in the stone. The flame inside is weak, guttering against the sooty pane. He takes more care with it, trimming, cleaning, filling with oil. When it catches properly, glowing steady at last, he feels a quiet satisfaction. Not pride exactly, but the simple contentment of a task completed well. In a city that rarely notices such things, it is enough for him to know. The hours stretch, the night is long, and yet it never feels endless. Each lamp marks a measure of time, a step in the passage from dusk to dawn. The lamplighter thinks of the sun waiting just beyond the horizon, preparing to reclaim the city with its brighter glow. The lamps will fade then, their work done, until night falls again. It is the rhythm of his life. Light the lamps, let them burn, snuff them at dawn. Again and again, the cycle continues, as steady as breath. And so he walks, still and always, beneath the quiet lamps of London. The lamplighter pauses beneath another lantern and listens to the quiet. It is the kind of quiet that lives inside stone and wood and water, a quiet that does not vanish, only softens when footsteps pass. He lifts his pole once more, checks a wick, and watches the tiny flame hold its place. There is nothing dramatic in the motion, only care, a patient trimming, a thoughtful glance, a steady hand. The glass pane takes a slow breath of his fog, then clears. The lamp answers him with a steady glow. He walks on. Along a narrow lane, a door stands ajar, only a finger's width. A slice of hearthlight slips out and rests upon the cobbles like a ribbon. The lamplighter steps through it, and for an instant, the orange warmth folds around his ankles. Then he is beyond it, back into the cool of the night. On a windowsill, a clay mug waits to be fetched in. It gathers a skin of dew that will surprise a sleepy hand at first light. The lamp above it hums softly, the oil settling. He smooths the thought the way one smooths a sheet, lightly, without pressing. He turns toward the river once more. The water wears the night like a shawl, its fringe of ripples catching and releasing the lamplight in tiny stitches. Boats whisper against their moorings, ropes sigh, wood taps wood, then rests. Somewhere out on the slow current, a single oar dips and rises, more suggestion than sound. He lets that faint rhythm enter his stride. A corner lamp lists a little to one side, stubborn as always. He knows it. Tonight its wick will not seat until he turns the knife a hair's breadth more. He does so, careful as sewing, and feels the instant when the flame finds its centre. The pain clears, the halo widens, the stones accept their pale wash of comfort. He moves along a row of workshops, coopers, turners, a joiner whose shavings still curl like sleeping shells on the floor. The lamps look in through slatted shutters and make lace-like shadows of the wood. In the joiner's place, a measuring stick leans against the bench, tall as a boy. A mouse has left the neatest commas of sawdust on the sill. He notices, and the noticing is enough. Past the baker's yard, he goes, where the oven is not yet woken, but the flour already remembers warmth. He can almost feel the moment that will come, the first push of heat, the smell of browning crust, the trembling air. The lamps will watch that too, as they have watched everything else, without demand, without keeping score. A breath of wind arrives from the east, not strong, but new. It carries a thread of frost from far fields and a rumour of dawn. The lamplighter's cloak lifts and settles. He tilts his head toward the sky. Some nights the heavens keep their darkness unbroken. Tonight, a single pale band is loosening the seam between rooflines and clouds, not light yet, only the promise of it, folded thin. He turns down a lane where the houses press close and the lamps hang from iron brackets. Here, glass is bubbled and wavy, turning every flame into a small, breathing creature. He raises the pole, opens a latch, trims and oils. The flame answers, patient and low. Footsteps approach and then diminish. A man with a bundle at his back, a cord biting into his shoulder. He walks in his own weather of breath. A nod for the lamplighter, a nod returned. Two small boats pass one another on a wide sea, lantern to lantern, then are gone. The city exhales again. He reaches a square where the lamps stand in a modest ring, like friends in conversation. At the centre, a dry fountain holds a soft circle of shadow. Its stone basin is cold to the touch, and the lion faces sleep without complaint. He circles the square at an easy drift, testing each flame with the back of his gloved hand, feeling the faint heat through the leather, confirming what the eye already knows. Along the far edge, a milk pail gives a hollow ping as it settles. He does not see the hand that placed it there, only the sound hangs a heartbeat and fades. A shutter lifts 2 finger widths, a mother's listening shape at the gap, a quiet close. Not his business, not the lamps. Still the square keeps the secret gently. The horizon lightens by a shade you might miss if you blinked. Birds have not yet found their first syllable, but the silence prepares a place for them. There is a scent of raw bread rising from somewhere not far. Hopeful, unfinished, he is near the end of his outward route. Soon his steps will turn back upon themselves, and he will become the keeper of endings as he has been the maker of beginnings. He does not hurry that moment. The night deserves its whole breath. He pauses at a lamp whose glass bears the faint scratch of a child's name, half rubbed away by time and weather. The letters hold their shape only if the light strikes slantwise, as it does just now. He places his palm to the pane a moment, warming what can be warmed, then lowers his hand and moves on. At last, the river opens beside him again, wider now, a long shoulder of pewter under the paling sky. A gull folds and unfolds itself above the water. From a landing, a fisherman lifts a coil of rope with the care one gives to morning. The rope answers with a soft rasp, the kind of sound that looks like grey wool in the mind. The lamps closest to the river feel the change first. Their halos thin, not from weakness but from the world becoming more itself. The stones return their own colour, the doors find their paint, the iron remembers its weight. He greets the change as one greets a neighbour at the gate, with familiarity, not ceremony. Now he begins the second passage, the reverse procession. Snuffer cap tied firm to the end of his pole, pouch lighter, knife clean. He retraces the chain he made in darkness and touches each small sun he set in the night. One by one, softly, A lift of the pole, a careful cup, a patient count, and the ember's last breath turns to memory. No smoke of sorrow about it, just the correct conclusion to a sentence. He speaks to none and to all. A good job, a faithful watch, rest now. The city has taken back its features. Windows blink, someone coughs in a yard, a door's bolt slides, gentle as a lullaby. At the square, he moves clockwise, the way a clock's hand will soon move in haste. He is not in haste. Each lamp bows out of its watch. The fountain's lion wears the early light like a shawl. Down the narrower lanes he works without intrusion, letting the shadows become rooms again. Where he once trimmed and fed, he now thanks and closes. Where he once asked a flame to keep company, he now gives it leave. At the leaning post, the stubborn one, he rests a second longer. The wick, he convinced into balance, gives up its glow without quarrel. He tips the cap, waits, and feels a brief warmth against the iron. He always leaves this one with a small thought. Not a prayer exactly, not a promise, just a remembering. The birds begin at last, tentative notes that test the morning. A baker turns a peal. Somewhere the thin bell of a handcart rings once. The lamps are mostly out now, their glass showing only the pale sky and his own faint shape moving past. He takes the final street at an amble. The long row that had looked like a necklace at midnight is a simple thread now, laid neatly along the curb. He lifts the pole, cups the last light, and the night is done. For a long breath he stands still. Behind his eyelids, the city remains in its nocturne, the stitched reflections on water, the soft ring of a pail, the warming pane, the ribbon of door light. When he opens them, the day has set its first plate on the table. He turns for home. The tools ride light at his side. Stones that were cool are warming. Smoke tests the chimneys. Somewhere, a child laughs at nothing at all, which is the best reason. The lamplighter walks through what he has tended, neither proud nor weary, only complete. The city will be other things to other people today. For him, it will be a place that kept his company in the hours between, and let him go when morning was ready. He steps into a narrow court where the sun will soon strike, and the quiet folds itself away like a blanket ready for tonight. The lamplighter makes his way along the stones, the faintest pale light growing stronger in the sky above. The last of the night's coolness clings to his cloak, though it is already loosening its grip. The air is different now, less secretive, less hushed. It has taken on the faint stirrings of day, as though the city itself is shifting in its sleep, preparing to wake. He hears a door creak open somewhere behind him. A bucket scrapes against stone. The sound of water poured into a trough follows, splashing gently, steady and ordinary. No words are exchanged. The work of morning begins without fanfare, as it always has. The lamplighter passes beneath a row of windows, their shutters now cracked open to let the first light in. Inside, figures move slowly, their shapes faint against the dim glow of hearths being stirred back to life. Bread crusts are broken, coals are poked, and children murmur drowsily, called too early from their sleep. The lamps above these windows are already dim, their glow paling against the growing light. Still, he lets them be until his return with the snuffer. A cart rattles past him, its wheels clattering against the stones. The horse snorts, breath clouding faintly in the cool morning air. The driver hums a low tune, not for anyone to hear, only for himself. The sound fades as the cart turns a corner, leaving behind the faint smell of hay and leather. The lamplighter pauses a moment and looks back. The cart's wheels leave damp lines in the cobbles, a brief trail that will vanish as the sun dries the stones. Everything vanishes eventually, he thinks, but the lamps will return each night, as steady as the tide, as patient as the stars. He enters another square, this one livelier than before. Though it is still early, a handful of vendors are already arranging their goods. Wooden stalls creak as shutters are propped open. A basket of apples is lowered to the ground, the fruit rolling gently before being gathered again. The smell of fresh herbs drifts from a bundle tied with string, sharp and green. The lamplighter does not linger. He moves quietly around the edge of the square, tending the lamps as though invisible. Few notice him, fewer still spare him a word, but he minds little. The lamps are his company, and the work is its own reward. The sky grows lighter still. A soft band of gold spreads along the horizon, chasing away the last traces of night. Shadows shorten, becoming less mysterious, more ordinary. The lamps, once guardians of the dark, now look faint and modest, their flames no match for the coming day. Yet the lamplighter does not hurry. He knows their time will end soon, but each flame deserves its moment, its last watch before the sun takes over. He walks on steadily, listening to the gradual symphony of morning. A broom against stone, a gate swinging on its hinge, the faint call of a bird testing its voice. He remembers other mornings much the same. Winters where frost clung to the lamps like lace, summers where the dawn came too quickly, leaving him with barely an hour of true dark. Each season changes the work, yet the rhythm remains. The lamps burn, and he tends them. The night falls, and he walks. The dawn comes, and he returns home. The city may shift and grow, but the lamps still wait each evening, and each morning they bow out in turn. The lamplighter turns toward his own street now, though he does not think of rest just yet. His steps are measured, his gaze steady, his thoughts unhurried. The lamps will need him again soon enough. For now, he lets the morning grow around him, soft and inevitable, like a tide rising without rush. The lamplighter turns down a lane he has walked countless times before. The stones here are narrower, the walls closer, and the sound of his steps is softened by the way the houses lean over him. The lamps above his head burn faintly now, their flames paling as the sky grows brighter. He will return with the snuffer soon, but for the moment he lets them stand, watching them fade gently, like stars at the edge of dawn. The air carries new scents, the sharpness of coal smoke as early hearths are stirred back to life, the faint sweetness of bread beginning to bake, dough rising in warm ovens, and somewhere nearby the sharper tang of a tanner's yard, leather and lime and damp hides. To some, these smells might seem harsh. To the lamplighter, they are familiar, part of the city's morning breath. He passes by a courtyard where laundry lines are strung across the open space. The sheets are still damp with night air, hanging limp and cool. Soon they will lift and sway in the breeze, catching the sun's warmth. But for now they rest, pale shapes against the dim sky. The lamp at the edge of the courtyard flickers faintly, and he checks its wick with practiced care. A drop more oil, a soft adjustment, and the flame steadies once again, though it has only a little time left before the day overtakes it. At another corner, he sees a boy sweeping the stoop of a small shop. The broom scratches softly against the stones, the sound rhythmic, steady. The boy does not look up, and the lamplighter does not interrupt. Each is wrapped in his own duty, one clearing dust, the other tending flame. Different tasks, but bound by the same quiet persistence. A few steps farther on, he hears the soft cluck of hens in a small pen, restless now as the first light begins to show. One flutters its wings against the wooden slats, shaking loose a few feathers that drift slowly down. The lamplighter watches them settle on the ground, then moves on. The city feels different in this hour, balanced between night and day. It is no longer dark, yet not fully bright. The lamps are still needed, though their glow is gentle now, almost shy in the presence of the coming sun. The lamplighter has always liked this time. It feels as though the city itself is in between breaths, not yet awake, not quite asleep. He remembers walking this same route in other years. Once he paused at this very corner to watch snow falling, each flake glowing briefly in the lamplight before disappearing on the stones. Another time he lingered here in summer when the air was warm and heavy with the smell of flowers carried from gardens beyond the city walls. The lamps bore witness to it all, unchanging in their duty. He nears his own street now, though he does not hurry. A cat slips out from under a cart and pads across his path, its tail raised high. It pauses beneath a lamp, where the flame still glows faintly, and sits to watch him as he passes. The lamplighter nods in greeting, though the animal gives no sign in return. Still, the company is welcome, however brief. The rooftops ahead are edged with pale gold. The first true light of morning has arrived. The lamps shrink against it, their flames thin and delicate, like threads unravelling. He will return with the snuffer soon, walking again through the city to extinguish what he has kindled. But for now, he lets the lamps stand a little longer, giving their final watch before they yield to the sun. He adjusts the strap of his pouch, worn soft against his shoulder, and shifts the pole in his hand. The weight is familiar, almost comforting. The tools of his trade are simple, but they are enough. A flask of oil, a trimming knife, a rag darkened with soot. With these, he has kept the lamps alive through countless nights, through rain, frost, and fog. With these, he has given the city its quiet chain of light. As he steps into his street, he pauses for a moment. Behind him, the city stretches out, no longer cloaked in night, but not yet busy with the full noise of day. The lamps he lit still glow faintly, though already the dawn begins to swallow them. He stands there in the stillness, watching, letting the moment linger. The work of the night is nearly over, and the work of the day is just beginning. The lamplighter stands for a moment, looking back at the quiet web of lamps he has tended. He thinks of the people who move beneath them, each carrying their own lives, their own burdens, their own hopes. The lamps themselves do not choose whom they serve. They shine for all, steady and unjudging. He recalls the merchant who once paused to thank him, saying that the glow outside his shop let him sleep without worry. He recalls the woman who hurried past with a bundle in her arms, her face drawn and tired, the lamplight resting briefly on her brow before she disappeared into the shadows. And he recalls the children who sometimes chase each other in the pools of light, their laughter echoing until it fades into the dark. The lamps see them all. The lamplighter tends them all. He considers how different the city feels at night compared to the day. In daylight, the streets are crowded, noisy, full of movement and colour. Every stall cries for attention, every cart clatters by, every voice rises to be heard. But in the hours between dusk and dawn, the city seems gentler, as though it draws a long breath and rests. The same stones that ring with countless footsteps by day are quiet under his boots. The same houses that bustle with trade and chatter are hushed, their shutters closed, their windows dark. The night softens everything. Even the lamps seem to breathe more slowly, their flames swaying in rhythm with the city's slumber. Sometimes, when he is deep in his route and no one stirs, the lamplighter feels as though the city belongs only to him. The river, the alleys, the squares, each feels like a companion keeping him company. It is not ownership, not possession, but a quiet understanding, a sharing. The city allows him to walk its spine when all others sleep, and in return he gives it light. As he walks toward his door, his thoughts wander to the generations before him. Other men once carried the same tools, walked the same streets, tended the same lamps. Their names are forgotten, but their work is not. Each night that the city glowed with faint flame, each path lit for a weary traveller, each doorway eased into shadow by a circle of light. These were gifts left by hands like his, steady and unremembered. He wonders too about the future. Will others take up the pole after him? Will the lamps remain, or will some new invention replace them? It matters little to him now, but the thought drifts gently across his mind, like smoke that curls once before vanishing. The lamplighter passes one final row of lamps. They are dim now, faint against the pale morning sky, but still holding their flame. He studies them, one by one, as though memorizing their glow. Each has been his companion through the long night. Each has been kept alive by his hand. Soon he will return to snuff them, walking again through the city to draw the night to its end. But for now he lets them linger. There is no need to hurry. The city will wake in its own time, and the lamps will bow out with quiet grace. The first bells of morning sound faintly in the distance. Their notes drift across the rooftops, soft and steady, calling the day into being. The lamplighter listens, his hand resting lightly on the pole at his side. The night has done its work, and so has he. Now, the lamps wait for their gentle farewell. The lamplighter rests for a time at the edge of the street, his pole leaning lightly against his shoulder. The city is stirring, faintly, but the lamps still hold their small places in the quiet. Now, the second part of his work begins. What he kindled in darkness, he must release in light. He fits the snuffer to the end of his pole, a small iron cup, blackened from long use. It is not heavy, not sharp, but it is final. Each flame that danced at his hand in the night will bow to it now, one by one. He begins at the first lamp of his return. The flame wavers as the cup lowers over it. There is a faint sigh, almost too soft to hear, and then the glass pane is empty. The lamp still stands, but its watch is ended. The lamplighter holds for a moment, waiting, as if to honour the silence that follows, before moving on. At the next lamp, he does the same. A gentle reach, a soft covering, a pause. The flame vanishes, leaving only the faint scent of smoke. The lamplighter nods once, not to anyone, but to the flame itself, as though thanking it for its service. Street by street, lamp by lamp, he moves. The rhythm is the same as in the lighting, yet different. The night had begun with sparks, with flames catching, with the faint bloom of light. Now it ends with sighs, with smoke fading, with glass cooling in the pale air. It is not a sad task, not a cheerful one, only necessary, only steady. As he works, the city grows brighter around him. The rooftops glow with morning. Windows open wider, shutters are thrown back. Voices rise, carts roll, animals stir, but the lamplighter pays them little mind. His duty is with the lamps, and he will not leave them until each has rested. At one corner, he pauses longer than usual. The lamp here burned especially bright through the night. Its glass is still warm when he touches it. He lowers the snuffer slowly, almost reluctantly, and listens as the flame yields. The glass darkens, its glow gone. Yet he does not feel loss, only completion. The lamp has done what was asked of it, and now it rests. He moves toward the square, where the ring of lamps still glows faintly. The fountain at its centre is pale now, its stone lion washed in daylight. The lamplighter circles the square, snuffing each lamp in turn. One by one, the flames surrender. By the time he completes the circle, the square is left to the morning alone. The river is last. Here the lamps reflect still in the water, though dimly. Each reflection wavers as he lowers the snuffer, vanishing from the surface as from the flame itself. The river accepts the change without protest. Its current carries on, endless, steady, neither brighter nor darker. When the last flame is gone, the lamplighter lowers his pole and stands still. The city is no longer his, not as it was in the night. It belongs now to the day, to the merchants, the workers, the children. His task is ended until dusk calls him again. He breathes deeply, the air warmer now, touched with sunlight. The faint smell of smoke lingers on his cloak, on his hands, on the rag in his pouch. It will cling to him always, as much a part of him as his breath. And with steady steps, he turns at last toward home. The lamplighter steps away from the river, his pole resting lightly in his hand. The lamps are dark now, each one closed to the day, but their memory still lingers in his thoughts. He walks slowly, without haste, letting the city wake around him. A church bell rings somewhere in the distance, its sound carried gently on the morning air. The note is not hurried, not loud, but steady. It falls across the rooftops, settles into the alleys, and rests in the open courtyards. The lamplighter listens as the echoes fade, then continues on. A baker's door is propped wide now, and the smell of bread drifts easily through the street. It is rich and warm, softening the air, drawing even the weary into a quiet hunger. The lamplighter pauses as he passes, breathing deeply, letting the scent fill his chest. He imagines the loaves rising, their crusts crackling as they meet the oven's heat. The lamps may be dark, but the ovens are alight, keeping the city's rhythm unbroken. In another lane, a blacksmith stirs his forge. The faint clang of iron on iron rings out, clear and bright against the morning silence. It is not yet the full thunder of work, only the testing of tools, the setting of rhythm. Still, the sound carries, a promise of the noise to come. The lamplighter lets it wash over him, steady and strong, before it fades into the background. Animals, too, wake with the light. A rooster calls from behind a wooden fence, its voice sharp and insistent. A pair of horses clop past him, their harnesses jingling faintly, their breath puffing white in the air. A dog barks once, then again, before settling into silence. The city is alive now, gently, carefully, as though stretching after a long sleep. He notices the way the light changes the stones beneath his feet. Only an hour ago they were slick and dark, catching only the glow of the lamps. Now they show their true colours, grey and brown, some worn nearly smooth, others cracked and uneven. The sunlight sharpens their edges, but the lamplighter remembers them better as they were in the night, softened, blurred, made gentle by the flame. He passes by a row of stalls being opened for the day's market. Wooden shutters swing outward with a creak, ropes are pulled taut, and baskets are lifted into place. A woman arranges bunches of leeks, their green tops spilling across the table. A man lifts a wheel of cheese carefully onto a board, its rind pale in the growing light. Children chase one another around the edges of the stalls, their laughter bright, their feet quick on the stones. The lamplighter watches a moment, then continues, his own steps steady and calm. The rooftops now gleam with the first touch of sun. Chimneys send thin trails of smoke into the air, curling lazily upward. Windows shine, some open, some still shuttered, catching the morning in their glass. The city is no longer half asleep. It is awake now, alive, full of movement. The night has fully passed, and with it, the lamp's quiet watch. The lamplighter adjusts the strap on his shoulder, his pouch nearly empty now. The trimming knife rests quiet, the rag folded and still. The tools will wait until dusk when they are needed once more. For now, he carries them only as reminders, weightless in the growing day. At last, he turns into his own narrow street. It is quieter here, tucked away from the busiest roads. A cat sits on a windowsill, tail curling as it watches him pass. A pot of herbs leans out over a ledge, dew still clinging to its leaves. The morning light falls gently across the stones, softening every edge. He reaches his door, and for a moment he lingers, looking back down the street he has walked so many times before. The city is bright now, its work begun, its voices rising. The lamps are dark, their flames at rest, and so too will he rest until the evening calls him again. The lamplighter rests his hand for a moment on the latch of his door, but does not yet go inside. The street is quiet here, touched only by the faint notes of distant bells and the first voices of the market. He lingers, his thoughts as unhurried as his steps have been through the night. He thinks of the lamps, of course. Some people pass them without a glance, noticing only when they fail. Others pause beneath them, grateful for the small circle of safety they cast. But for him, the lamps are companions, silent, steady, and faithful, each one a small heart beating against the dark. He wonders sometimes if anyone truly sees his work. By the time most wake, the lamps are already extinguished, their flames vanished with the night. The city does not cheer for the man who lights its way while it sleeps, and yet that is no matter. The lamps burn, and that is enough. The streets are safer, the shadows softened, the silence made gentler. That is all the reward he requires. He recalls the first night he carried the pole, years ago. His hands had trembled as he reached for the latch, his heart quick with the fear of spilling oil or fumbling with the wick. But the flame caught, steady and strong, and something in him settled. From that night on, he knew, this work was not grand, not celebrated, but it mattered. It was a thread woven quietly into the life of the city, holding together the hours that might otherwise unravel into fear. Sometimes he thinks of the lamps as markers of time, more faithful than clocks. Each flame tells him where he is, not only in the street, but in the night itself. The first lamps at dusk signal the beginning of his watch. The last lamps at dawn whisper of rest. Between them lies the rhythm of his life, one step after another, one flame after another, night after night. The lamplighter lifts his eyes to the brightening sky. It is pale now, soft with morning, the deep blues of night dissolved into light. The sun has not yet crested the rooftops, but its promise is certain, and when it rises, it will do what the lamps cannot. It will flood the city with brilliance, with warmth, with clarity. His work will fade in its presence as it should. The lamps are guardians of darkness, not rivals of the day. He smiles faintly at the thought, though no one is there to see it. There is peace in knowing one's place, in keeping watch until another takes over. The lamps yield to the sun as he yields to rest, and so the cycle continues. He grips the latch at last and pushes the door gently inward. The hinges groan, a sound he has heard countless times before, steady and familiar. He steps across the threshold, leaving the brightening street behind. The pole rests against the wall, the pouch is set down, the knife and rag folded neatly beside it. The tools will wait, as they always do, until the city needs them once more. The lamplighter exhales, slow and long, the way one does when a night's duty has ended. The city outside continues to wake, but for him, The watch is done. Inside his small room, the lamplighter moves slowly. There is no need for haste. He sets aside his cloak, heavy now with the faint smell of smoke and oil. He leans his pole in its place by the door, where it will wait for him as it always has. The pouch is emptied carefully, knife wrapped, rag folded, flask set on the shelf. Every item has its place, and he places them with the same patience he carried through the night. The table is simple, the chair plain, but he does not mind. He has walked streets grander than his home, and darker too. Here, there is quiet. Here, he needs nothing more. He thinks again of the lamps, those faithful flames now resting. Even as the sun rises, he can still picture them. A line of small guardians stretched across the stones, each one holding its circle of light against the weight of shadow. They seem fragile, yet they endure. A single wick, a cup of oil, a flame that dances and bends. And still, it keeps the night at bay. The lamplighter knows that his work is not a grand tale. It will not be sung in ballads, nor carved into stone. But it matters, and that is enough. He reflects on the nature of light itself, how it is never still, always moving. A flicker, a sway, a shimmer on glass. And yet, in that motion, there is constancy. The flame may tremble, but it remains. The lamps may smoke and falter, but they endure until the dawn. So, too, is life, he thinks. Never steady, never fixed, always trembling in some small way. But through that trembling comes the shape of days and nights, woven together like the threads of a loom. He closes his eyes a moment, recalling how the city looks when only the lamps burn. The streets are softened, the walls gentler, the silence deeper. The lamps are not bright, they do not banish the dark, only temper it, and perhaps that is better. For shadows are not enemies. They are simply the other side of light. The lamps do not erase them, they keep them company. The lamplighter breathes slowly, listening to the faint creaks of the city outside his door. A wheel turning, a child calling, a rooster giving its final morning cry. Life continues, as it always does, and he, who walked through its silence, now rests while others take their turn. On the wall, a faint line of sunlight has begun to creep, sliding across the boards, warming them. The night has ended fully now. The lamps are dark, the day is awake. The lamplighter lets his thoughts loosen, one by one, as though he were snuffing them gently, until only stillness remains. The lamplighter sits by his small table, though he does not eat, nor busy himself with chores. He simply sits, his body at rest, while his thoughts wander, drifting as gently as smoke rising from a snuffed wick. He thinks of the night as a living thing. It arrives each evening, quiet but certain, folding over the city like a great cloak. For many, it brings unease. The unknown hides in its corners, the silence grows heavy, the shadows deepen into mystery. But the lamplighter knows the night differently. To him, it is not an enemy, but a companion that needs tending, guiding, softening with flame. Each lamp is like a small heartbeat within that cloak, steady and warm, reminding all who see it that they are not lost. It does not banish the night, it never could. But it makes the night gentler, easier to bear, and perhaps that is enough. He reflects on the sun too, the great flame above all flames, the fire that wakes fields, brightens water, warms bone and stone alike. The lamps cannot rival it, nor do they wish to. They are only caretakers of the hours when the sun must rest. When dawn comes, the lamps bow their heads, yielding to the brighter light, their task finished, their watch complete. The lamplighter finds peace in this. There is no shame in stepping aside when the greater work arrives. Every flame has its season, every watch its ending, every life its rhythm. He remembers winters when the lamps struggled against the heavy dark, how their glass fogged with frost, how the flames guttered in cold winds, how he cupped his hands around them to shield their fragile glow. And he remembers summers when the night was brief, when he had scarcely kindled the last flame before the first bird sang to announce the dawn. The seasons turned, but the lamps endured, their task unchanging though the hours shifted. He leans back in his chair, eyes half closed, listening to the faint murmurs of the waking city. The voices are brighter now, more certain. The market calls rise, carts roll heavily, footsteps quicken, but he remains in stillness. The night is still with him, lingering in his bones, the hush of shadows, the patience of flame, the rhythm of steady steps across cobbles. He knows he will walk again tonight, pole in hand, oil at his side, the same routes, the same lamps, the same steady ritual, and he welcomes it. There is comfort in the returning cycle, in knowing what will come, in repeating it with care, again and again, until his steps are no longer needed, and another hand takes up the pole. The lamplighter opens his eyes once more, watching the sunlight reach across the wall of his room. The warmth of it rests against the wood, soft and golden, and for the first time since dusk, he allows himself to feel the pull of sleep. The city is awake now. It no longer needs him. And so he closes his eyes, carrying with him the memory of the lamps. Their gentle flames swaying in the dark, their quiet companionship, their faithful watch. The lamplighter lets his eyes rest half-closed. His thoughts wander not to tasks, nor to duties, but to patterns. The endless rhythm of light and dark, the slow turning of the world, the way one moment yields so gently to the next. He thinks of night as a tide. It comes quietly, flowing into streets and alleys, slipping through windows, folding around rooftops, and then, just as quietly, it recedes, drawn back by the pull of dawn. The lamps are like small boats set upon that tide, each one steady, each one faithful, each one carrying its fragile flame until the waters fall again. He thinks of day as a great river. It runs bright and swift, filling the city with sound and colour, rushing over stones, spilling into every open place. And yet, even rivers grow still at dusk. Even rivers must quiet themselves in shadow. That is when the lamps are needed, their little lights guiding the way until the current swells once more. The lamplighter sees in his mind the seasons passing, as though he were walking them with his pole in hand. Winter nights are long, the lamps glowing bravely against frost and fog. Spring nights smell of rain, the flames trembling gently in the breeze. Summer nights are short, the lamps barely awake before the birds call them to sleep again. And autumn nights are cool, the lamps reflecting in puddles, their light doubled in the dark water at their feet. Through it all, the lamps endure, their flames bending but never breaking, their glow repeating, season after season. The lamplighter leans his head back against the chair. His breath slows, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of rest. The sounds of the city beyond his door grow fainter, not because they are gone, but because he has turned inward, toward the quieter music of memory and thought. He imagines the lamps as stars brought down to earth, not dazzling, not unreachable, but near at hand, guiding the weary, warming the watchful, softening the shadows. They are humble stars, but perhaps all the more precious for it. He thinks, too, of the people who pass beneath them. The traveller with tired feet, the watchman on his steady patrol, the mother carrying her child through the still hours, the child chasing shadows across the stones, all of them brushed by the same flame, all of them held, if only for a moment, by the quiet circle of light. The lamps do not choose, they give freely, and in their giving they keep the city whole. The lamplighter exhales once more, long and even. The line of sunlight across the wall grows wider, creeping steadily, slowly, as all things do. He feels the heaviness of rest settling in his limbs, not unpleasant, not forced, only natural, like a flame bending toward its end, like a lamp yielding to dawn. And in that heaviness, he feels comfort, for he knows the night will return. He knows the lamps will call to him again, and he will rise, take up his pole, and walk once more through the silent streets, giving light where there is dark, and quiet where there is fear. It is a small work, a humble work, but it is steady, and in that steadiness there is peace. The lamplighter sits in stillness, his thoughts no longer of tasks, but of rhythms. Everything in life, he knows, has its rhythm. The rise and fall of breath, the beating of a heart, the turning of the sun, the deep return of the night. The lamps, too, have their rhythm. Each flame is like a heartbeat, small, steady, constant, reminding the city that it is alive even in the quietest hours. Each circle of light is like a breath, expanding softly, then fading at the edges, only to be renewed with every flicker of the flame. Sometimes, when the lamplighter walks alone in the stillest streets, he imagines the lamps as dreams the city is having. Each one glows with its own vision. A dream of safety at a doorway, a dream of laughter where children once played, a dream of silence in a lane where shadows linger. The city sleeps, but its lamps dream for it, gentle dreams that carry the night until the sun returns. The lamplighter finds comfort in these thoughts, for he knows that one day his steps will cease, his hands will no longer hold the pole, his pouch will rest untouched on its hook, but the rhythm will not end. Another will take his place, another will tend the lamps, and the night will be softened as it always has been. And even when the lamps themselves are gone, when some brighter invention replaces their flames, still the rhythm will continue. There will always be night. There will always be those who carry light into it. The form may change, but the heart of it, the steady offering of comfort, will remain. He shifts in his chair, his body sinking deeper into stillness. The sunlight on the wall has grown brighter, but in his mind the lamps still glow, their flames swaying gently, endlessly, like stars that never burn out, like dreams that never end. He feels his own breath slow to match them, in and out, like the lamps flickering, like the night itself breathing. The city outside grows louder, but for him the world is quiet. The night is still within him, its calm flowing like a river, its lamps glowing like a string of hearts. The lamplighter closes his eyes. He sees once more the long line of lamps he tended, stretching through streets and alleys, reflected in puddles, trembling in fog, shining on water. Each one is a breath, each one is a heartbeat, each one is a dream, and as he drifts, he knows the rhythm will continue without end, soft and steady, like flame, like breath, like rest. The lamplighter leans back in his chair, his eyes half closed, and in the stillness he begins to notice how every sound of his work, every note of the city, fits together like music. His footsteps on the cobbles are the first beat, steady and unchanging, a slow drum marking the rhythm of the night. The soft clink of tools in his pouch joins in, like a faint rattle of percussion, never loud, only constant. When he trims a wick, the scratch of the blade against charred cotton is another note, delicate and sharp, while the sigh of the flame catching becomes a low hum that settles into the background. Even the breeze, curling around corners and through alleys, carries its own whistle, high and fleeting, blending into the rest. As he walked the city's streets, he often found himself listening more than watching. There were nights when the silence was so complete that every creak of timber, every shift of rope at the river, every drop of water falling from a gutter became an instrument in the symphony of darkness. The lamps were part of that music too. They did not sing loudly, but each one gave a small, steady tone, a faint hiss as oil fed the wick, a whisper as smoke curled upward, a soft pop as the flame settled into place. Together, these tiny sounds formed a chorus, not meant for celebration, not meant for applause, but for comfort. It was the song of the night itself, the kind of music that soothed, that filled spaces without ever demanding to be heard. He remembers nights of fog, when the sounds grew muffled, softened as though wrapped in wool. On those nights, the symphony played more slowly, each note stretched longer, the whole city seeming to move in a quieter tempo. His footsteps seemed to fall deeper, cushioned by the damp. The flames seemed to hum more softly, their hiss swallowed before it reached his ear. Even the river, usually lively in its murmurs, grew subdued, its water gliding with the heaviness of a bow drawn slowly across the strings of a cello. He felt then that the night itself was drawing out a long, low song, one meant not to stir but to lull, not to awaken but to soothe. In contrast, he recalls clear winter nights, when the air was sharp and cold, and every sound rang bright and crisp. His boots cracked against frozen stones with the sharpness of cymbals. The trimming knife against the wick was a bright pluck, like the plink of a harp string. The lamps themselves burned more fiercely then, their flames snapping against the cold, as if eager to prove their strength. The river, edged in ice, creaked and groaned like the bass notes of an organ, heavy and resonant, filling the background. On such nights the city's music was not soft and muffled, but clear, bright and strong, as though the night wanted to remind him that even in darkness there could be clarity. As he sits now remembering these sounds, he realizes that his whole life has been shaped by this quiet music. The day may be loud, crowded with voices, clatter and shouts, but the night's music is his own, steady, patient, unnoticed by most, yet deeply familiar. He has walked through hundreds of nights, each with its own melody, each with its own rhythm, but always the same refrain: the steps, the flame, the sigh of oil, the river, the breeze. It is a lullaby without end, one that he has carried in his bones so long that it hums within him even when he sits alone in silence. He thinks that perhaps this is why he loves the lamps so much. They are not merely flames in glass, they are notes in a song that has no beginning and no end. Each one contributes to the whole, each one keeping the night from becoming empty. Without them, the music would falter, the rhythm would break, and the city would be left in silence too deep, too heavy to bear. But with them the song continues, quiet, unhurried, endlessly repeating like the heart, like the breath, like the turning of the earth itself. The lamplighter lets this thought sink deep into him. He knows that when he sleeps, the memory of that music will drift with him into his dreams. He will hear it again, not with his ears, but with his heart, the faint hiss of flame, the sigh of smoke, the quiet hum of night, and it will cradle him just as surely as it cradled the city while it slept, and when he wakes at dusk, it will be there waiting for him again, ready to be played once more, steady and unchanging. The lamplighter sits quietly, his body at ease, his eyes growing heavy, and yet his thoughts drift once more. Now he imagines the lamps not only as flames, not only as heartbeats or dreams, but as voices, gentle, quiet voices that carry the memory of the city through the long hours of night. Each lamp seems to him like a storyteller, whispering softly, not in words that can be heard, but in a language that only the stones and shadows understand. One lamp might carry the memory of a merchant who stood beneath its glow many winters ago, adjusting his cloak as he counted coins after a long day's trade. Another lamp might remember the hurried footsteps of a young man running late, his shadow leaping and bending as the flames swayed in the breeze. Still another might hold the echo of a child's laughter, skipping circles around its post until the voice of a parent called them home. These are not great histories, not the stories written in books or carved into monuments. They are the smaller tales, the forgotten ones, the quiet details that make up the true life of a city. The lamplighter believes the lamps have kept all of it. They have seen lovers meet in secret, hands brushing under their glow. They have watched tired workers trudge home, their shoulders heavy but their steps lightened by the small circle of safety the lamp provided. They have seen tears as well as laughter, moments of parting as well as reunion. And though no one asks them to remember, the lamps do. They stand in silence, night after night, watching, holding, whispering their knowledge back into the dark. When he trims a wick, he sometimes wonders what the lamp might have to say if it could speak. Would it tell him of all it has seen, all it has guarded, all it has kept in confidence? Or would it simply hum softly, as it always does, offering not stories but the comfort of its presence? The lamplighter thinks perhaps it is both. The lamps do not need to reveal their secrets in words. Their very glow is a kind of speech, a steady reassurance that life continues, that the city is held gently through the night. He imagines that if one could listen closely enough, with more than ears, one might hear the lamps whispering their history to the stars above. A conversation between flame and sky, between earth and heaven. The stars keep watch from far away, eternal and bright, while the lamps echo them on the ground, small and humble, but no less faithful. Together they keep the city safe in its slumber, one with vast brilliance, the other with fragile, flickering devotion. The lamplighter finds peace in this thought, that even the smallest flame, tended night after night, becomes a keeper of memory. His own life, too, may pass without record, his name fading as so many others have. But the lamps will remember. They will carry something of him in their glow, the rhythm of his steps, the steadiness of his hand, the patience with which he cared for each flame. Long after he is gone, the lamps will continue their whispers, holding the memory of every lamplighter who came before, and every lamplighter who will come after. And so, as he leans back in his chair and lets his eyes finally close, he feels no sadness in the thought of endings. The lamps will remain. Their voices will carry on, softly, endlessly, like a lullaby whispered through the streets. They will tell the story of the city, not in loud proclamations, but in quiet, steady glows, one flame at a time. The lamplighter sits in the stillness of his small room, but in his mind the lamps are still burning. Their glow has not left him. It lingers behind his eyes like an after-image, and as his thoughts drift, he no longer sees them only as glass and iron, wick and oil, but as something more, something belonging to the great tapestry of the world itself. He imagines the lamps as fireflies scattered across the city. Each one flickers softly, drifting in and out of shadow, never too bright, never too sharp, but alive with its own gentle rhythm. They hover at corners, they cluster in squares, they line the edges of the river. The city itself becomes a meadow in the dark, filled with tiny lights that blink patiently, guiding, comforting, never overwhelming. Just as fireflies fill summer nights with wonder, so too do the lamps fill the streets with their quiet, steady magic. Above them the stars shine in their constellations, bright and eternal, far beyond his reach. Yet when he looks at the lamps, he sees a reflection of that same pattern, smaller, humbler, but connected. A lamp on one corner glimmers like a star of Orion's belt. A row of lamps down a long street stretches like the line of the Milky Way. The whole city, when seen from afar, must look like a sky turned upside down, the heavens mirrored on the ground. Perhaps, he thinks, that is why people feel comfort in their glow. To walk beneath the lamps is to walk among stars, close enough to touch. Sometimes he wonders if the lamps and the stars speak to each other. Do the stars look down and see their small cousins flickering bravely against the dark? Do the lamps look upward and find encouragement in the brilliance above? Perhaps they share the same purpose, to keep the night from becoming too heavy, too endless, too silent. One burns with ancient fire, the other with oil in glass, but both carry the same duty, to guide, to guard, to give light. And if the lamps are stars brought to earth, then perhaps the lamplighter himself is a kind of astronomer, charting their courses each night. His pole is not a telescope, but it points just the same. His steps are not drawn on parchment, but they trace a map across the cobbles, connecting flame to flame like lines drawn between constellations. Where others see only scattered lamps, he sees a pattern, one he has walked so many times it is etched into his bones. The lamplighter lets this thought deepen in him, as comforting as the steady beat of a lullaby. He is part of something larger, something older than himself. The lamps are not only flames to be trimmed and fed, they are fragments of the night sky, entrusted to his care. And in tending them, he has joined the rhythm of the universe itself. Stars above, lamps below, both burning faithfully until the dawn. The lamplighter has always known that no two lamps are quite the same. To most passers-by, they may all seem alike. Iron posts, glass panes, small flames flickering against the dark. But to him, each carries its own presence, its own quiet personality. Some lamps burn bright and steady, their flames strong against the wind, casting wide pools of light that make a whole corner feel secure. Others burn more timidly, their glow softer, reaching only a few steps outward, leaving much of the street in shadow. And yet, he thinks, there is beauty in both. The bold lamp reassures the traveller with its confidence, while the gentler flame asks the eyes to slow down, to look carefully, to tread with patience. Each has its role, and together they weave the city's tapestry of light. On certain streets, the lamps transform the stones into golden ribbons, stretching onward like paths that promise safety. Here, the mood is one of invitation, of openness. The lamps seem to say, "Walk on, traveller, there is no cause for fear." But in narrow alleys, where the flames barely reach the walls, the light becomes secretive, hesitant, almost shy. The mood there is quieter, as though the lamps whisper instead of sing. They do not banish the dark, but they soften it, giving enough glow to remind the walker that even shadows hold company. The lamplighter has learned to love these places most of all, for there is something deeply human in their mixture of light and shadow, something that speaks not of perfection, but of gentleness. In squares, the lamps change everything. Their glow gathers around the open space, pooling softly against the fountain, the benches, the shuttered stalls. Each lamp contributes a fragment of brightness, but together they create a circle of calm, as though the city itself were pausing, holding its breath in quiet companionship. He remembers nights when he lingered in such squares, leaning on his pole, listening to the silence gather. The lamps there felt less like guardians and more like friends in conversation, standing side by side, keeping watch over the empty stones. To walk through such a square is to feel that one is not alone, even if no other soul stirs. The lamps by the river carry yet another mood. Their flames tremble in the water's reflection, doubled and tripled in ripples that never settle. The light there is restless, shifting, dancing with every movement of the current. And yet, it is not chaotic. It is a kind of music, soft and fluid, like notes played upon the strings of water. He has stood at the docks many nights, watching the lamps cast their reflections into the Thames, and each time he felt the city speaking back to itself, its stillness above answered by its restlessness below. These lamps are storytellers of movement, reminding the city that even in quiet, there is always flow, always change, always passage. Even the lamps near doorways take on the moods of the homes they guard. A flame flickering beside a baker's shop seems to carry the scent of flour and rising dough. A lamp at the corner of a tavern glows with a warmth that feels almost like laughter, echoing faintly in the night air even after the doors are shut. And those near silent chapels burn more solemnly, their light clear and calm, as though holding vigil with the stones themselves. The lamplighter sometimes feels that his work is less about feeding oil and trimming wicks, and more about tending these quiet moods, these subtle conversations between flame and place. Each lamp is not only a light, but a voice, giving character to the small patch of city it watches over. He knows, too, that the moods of the lamps shift with the weather. On clear nights their flames stand tall, their light proud, and the streets feel open and bright. But when fog rolls in, the lamps shrink, their glow pressing closer round them, their halos blurred and hazy. In such times the lamps seem introspective, as though each one has retreated into its own world, keeping only a small circle alive against the heavy air. Rain changes them again, raindrops sliding down their glass like tears, distorting their light, scattering it into hundreds of tiny glimmers. The lamps become softer then, almost tender, their glow breaking apart and reforming, a reminder that even light can bend, even flames can blur, and yet they still endure. As he thinks of this, the lamplighter feels a kind of kinship with them. For are people not the same? Some steady and bold, some quiet and shy, some shining brightest in clear skies, others glowing gently through the storms. The lamps are not perfect, not uniform, but each does what it can, giving what it has, and together they keep the city safe. It is this, he realizes, that has always moved him most about his work. Not the flame itself, but the way each flame transforms its little corner of the world, filling it with presence, with meaning, with mood. The lamplighter has often wondered how many lifetimes the lamps have seen. They are not new, nor young, nor untouched by age. Many of them have stood in place longer than he has been alive, longer even than his father or grandfather before him. Some posts are worn smooth by countless hands, iron handles polished by fingers that lifted their latches decades ago. Some panes of glass still carry faint scratches left by children who pressed close, curious at the flame inside, long since grown and gone. To most who pass beneath them, the lamps are just ordinary fixtures of the street, but to him they are archivists, silent keepers of memory. They have watched, always watched, even when no one thought to notice. He imagines what stories each lamp might tell if only it could speak. There are lamps that have stood outside shops for 100 years, watching as signs changed, as trades faded, as new owners opened doors that were once closed forever. There are lamps at crossroads that have witnessed countless partings and reunions, tears in the night, embraces in the dark, whispered promises carried away in the wind. And there are lamps along the river that have seen floods rise and recede, boats sink and launch, fishers come and go. In their flames lives the rhythm of generations, unspoken but unbroken. When he tends the lamps, he sometimes feels the weight of those years pressing lightly upon him, not as a burden, but as a hum of continuity, a sense that his hand is only the latest in a long line of hands that have cared for these same flames. Others came before him, walking the same streets, oil flask in hand, trimming knife at their belt. He does not know their names, nor their faces, but he knows their steps. For when his boots strike the cobbles, when he raises his pole to the latch, when he waits for the flame to steady, he is doing what they once did, exactly as they once did it. In those small repetitions, he feels their presence, as though the very stones remember their passing. The city itself has changed, of course. He has seen old houses pulled down and new ones raised in their place. He has seen streets widened, bridges repaired, markets moved. He has watched children grow into adults, watched apprentices become masters, watched families rise and fall. But through all of it, the lamps have endured. They remain constant, their flames swaying against the same night sky, their posts rooted in the same stones. Where kingdoms shift and fortunes fade, the lamps remain, quiet and faithful, carrying light into darkness without expectation or pride. It comforts him to know this. For while men are forgotten, while names are erased by time, the work itself endures. He may not be remembered, but the lamps will carry forward the memory of his care, folded silently into their glow. Just as they remember those before him, so too will they carry him, not in words, but in the steady, unbroken chain of light. And one day, when his hands are gone, another lamplighter will walk where he walked, tend what he tended, and feel the same hum of continuity. The lamps will whisper to that man too, though not in words, only in their quiet way, the way they always have. He closes his eyes and pictures them not as flames, but as centuries lined in glass. Each lamp is a book, and each night another page. The wind flips the leaves, the rain stains the margins, the fog blurs the ink, but the story is never lost. It continues patiently, endlessly, in the language of light. The lamplighter has often wondered how many beginnings and endings the lamps have seen. They are not just guardians of empty streets, they are silent witnesses to the moments that shape a city's life. How many children took their very first steps beneath a circle of glow, their mother's hand steadying them while their shadows wobbled on the stones? How many apprentices left their homes for the first time at dawn, walking past the fading flames as they set out toward uncertain futures? How many times did a weary father return home late, shoulders heavy from the day's labor, taking comfort in the familiar flame that marked his doorway? The lamps did not cheer, did not console, but they watched, and in their watching gave a kind of presence, a reminder that even the smallest lives unfolded in the care of light. He knows, too, that the lamps have seen sorrow. There must have been nights when someone hurried beneath their glow carrying grief too heavy for words. A widow walking slowly home after her loss, a family leaving their house for the last time, possessions bundled in haste. The lamps could not ease the pain, yet their light was steady. Even in sorrow they burned the same, reminding the grieving that the night itself did not close in entirely, that there was still a glow, however faint, to mark their steps. Perhaps that is why some people pause beneath them in silence, staring at the flame as though seeking an answer. The lamps do not give answers, but they give steadiness, and sometimes that is what the heart needs most. And what of love? How many confessions were whispered under their glow? How many hands clasped timidly for the first time while a flame swayed above? How many kisses stolen in shadow, softened by the light that barely reached the stones? The lamps bore witness to all of it, the trembling beginnings, the fervent promises, the laughter, the partings. If each flame were to release its memories, the city would be flooded with voices, soft, fragile voices of love that bloomed and faded beneath their care. The lamplighter smiles faintly as he imagines this, a chorus of whispers carried on the night air, a history of tenderness written in the language of light. The lamps have also stood faithfully during labor, during toil, during the endless rhythm of survival. They have glowed over men hauling crates to the river long after the sun set, their breath ragged but their work unceasing. They have burned above women carrying baskets home, weary but strong, their steps guided by those circles of light. They have flickered faintly in alleys where the poorest lay down their heads, offering the smallest comfort to those who had none else. Each lamp has shone upon hundreds of such moments, the small, unremarkable labours that together build a city's life. It strikes the lamplighter that the lamps do not distinguish between any of this. They shine for joy as they shine for sorrow. They shine for love as they shine for loneliness. They shine for the rich and for the poor, for the young and the old, for those beginning their stories and those ending them. They do not judge, do not choose, do not falter. Their only task is to glow, and in that task they are unfailing. Perhaps that is why he feels such reverence for them. In their constancy there is a lesson. one he has tried to carry in his own life. He closes his eyes and imagines all those lives layered one atop another, all those footsteps, all those voices, all those tears and laughter and embraces. The lamps have seen them all, and though the people have long since moved on, some trace of them remains in the light itself, a warmth that is more than oil, more than flame. It is the warmth of humanity, preserved silently, night after night, in the guardianship of the lamps. There are nights, the lamplighter knows, when the city feels empty of people, when even the watchmen are far away on other streets, and the only sound is his own boots against the cobbles. In those hours, he does not feel entirely alone, for the lamps themselves become his companions. Each flame he kindles is like a friend greeting him at the corner, a silent figure waiting patiently for his arrival. The faint hiss of a wick catching, the sudden bloom of light in the glass. These are not just the motions of work, but the voices of company. One lamp glows with quiet steadiness, as though nodding to him. Another flickers playfully, swaying in the wind like a child tugging at his sleeve. They do not speak, but he feels their presence all the same, and in that presence he finds comfort. Sometimes he pauses longer than his duty requires, leaning against his pole and watching the flame dance. The city might be silent, but the lamp reminds him that he is not unseen. There is a kind of conversation between them, not in words, but in the steadiness of light. He gives it oil, he trims its wick, he shields it from the wind, and in return it burns, keeping its small watch, promising to endure until dawn. This exchange feels more honest to him than many of the hurried greetings he hears by day. The lamps never flatter, never deceive, never demand. They only shine, and in their shining, they give back to him what he has given them: patience, steadiness, and presence. He has walked these streets for so many years that the lamps have become markers in the map of his life. He knows them as one knows old friends, the crooked one that always needs more oil, the tall one by the tavern that glows proudly, the quiet one by the river whose flame reflects softly in the water. They are not just tools, not just glass and iron. They are companions who have kept him company in fog and frost, in rain and silence. When the world felt heavy, when his own thoughts pressed against him, he found solace in their glow. They reminded him that no night is absolute, that even the smallest flame can keep the dark from closing in completely. He wonders, at times, if the lamps have come to know him as well. Do they recognize the sound of his step, the weight of his hand on the latch, the steady way he trims their wicks? Do they feel the care he gives them, the quiet reverence with which he tends their flame? Perhaps they do not. Perhaps they are only flame and oil, no more alive than the stones beneath his boots. But in the long stillness of the night, he allows himself the thought that they do know him in their own way, and that they too are glad for his presence. This thought fills him with a kind of peace that no human company ever has. For people come and go, voices fade, names are forgotten. But the lamps remain, faithful, constant, unchanging in their duty. They do not grow weary, they do not betray, they do not turn away. Night after night they are there, waiting for him, trusting him, shining for him. They are his companions in solitude, his partners in the long watch, and though he may not speak of it aloud, he feels their companionship as surely as one feels the warmth of a hand resting on their own. The lamplighter has come to believe that the lamps are more than companions. In their quiet steadiness, in their faithful rhythm, they have also been his teachers. He has spent so many nights trimming wicks, feeding oil, shielding flames, that the lamps have become mirrors of his own life. From them he has learned patience. A flame cannot be rushed. If he hurries the trimming, it will gutter and smoke. If he pours the oil too quickly, it will spill and waste. If he tries to shield a flame with a clumsy hand, he risks extinguishing the very thing he seeks to protect. The lamps remind him that everything worth tending must be tended slowly, carefully, with hands that know how to wait. They have taught him humility as well. For though he carries the pole and flask, though he strikes the flame and trims the wick, the light itself is not his own. He may guide it, but he cannot command it. The flame burns only because it chooses to, because the oil accepts it, because the air allows it. He is only the caretaker, not the master. The lamps show him this truth night after night, that no matter how steady his steps, no matter how faithful his work, he is not the one who makes the flame endure. At best, He only gives it a chance. The rest is beyond him as the stars. And from the lamps he has learned endurance. The winds come, the rains fall, the fog drifts heavy, but still the flame persists. It bends but does not break. It trembles but does not surrender. There is something in that flicker, in that stubborn little glow, that teaches him how to live. Life too is full of winds, of rains, of fog that blinds. But like the lamps, one can endure, not with brilliance, not with grandeur, but with a small, steady flame that refuses to go out. Each time he sees a lamp tremble and then right itself, glowing steady once more, he feels a lesson settle into him. That strength is not the absence of weakness, but the choice to keep burning despite it. He has often thought that if the city only knew what the lamps taught him, perhaps they would look at them differently. They would not hurry past, seeing only a tool of convenience, but pause, if only for a moment, to let the flame speak. They would see that in its small, faithful circle of light lives a wisdom deeper than books or sermons. The lamp says, "Be patient, be humble, endure." The lamp says, "Shine not for applause, not for recognition, but simply because light is needed." The lamp says, "Do what you can, where you are, and let that be enough." For him, these lessons are not abstract. They have become the rhythm of his life. He wakes, he walks, he tends, he rests. His steps repeat, his motions repeat, his nights repeat. But within that repetition is peace. It is not monotony, but devotion. Just as the flame burns without needing to be told why, so does he walk without needing to explain why. The lamps have taught him that meaning lies not in greatness, but in constancy, not in shouting, but in glowing quietly, night after night, until the dawn. Sometimes as he walks, the lamplighter lets his mind wander toward an unsettling thought. What if the lamps were not there at all? He imagines the streets without their glow, each corner swallowed by shadow, each alley a pool of uncertainty. Without the lamps, the city would feel less like a place of shelter and more like a wilderness, its order dissolved into darkness. Merchants would close their shutters earlier, fearful of thieves. Mothers would call their children in before the sun had even set. Lovers would not linger on corners, and workers would hurry with anxious steps, clutching their cloaks tight. The absence of light would not merely darken the stones, it would weigh upon the hearts of the people, pressing them into their homes, teaching them caution instead of comfort. The lamplighter imagines a night when no flame greets him, when he lifts his pole and finds only emptiness. The silence of such a city would be profound. No sound of footsteps except his own, no faint glimmers in windows, no figures walking home with shadows stretched before them. He thinks it would be like walking through a forgotten ruin, as though the city had been abandoned. The lamps, he realizes, are what make the city alive at night. Their glow is not bright like the sun, but it is enough to remind people that life continues after dusk, that safety can still be found when the sky is black. Without them, the night would reclaim everything, and the people would retreat from its reach. It strikes him, too, that without the lamps, there would be no record of the small beauty he so often sees. The glimmer of light upon rain-wet cobblestones, the slow drift of fog curling through golden halos, the reflections in the river, like stars spilled upon the water. These things would vanish into darkness, unseen, unremembered. It is the lamps that allow the city to be beautiful at night, to shine in its own quiet way. Without them, there would be no wonder, no soft invitation for the weary eye to linger. The city would not sparkle. It would only disappear into shadow. And what of the people? He knows well how the lamps give courage to the lonely walker, how they lend assurance to the hesitant traveller. Without that faint circle of light waiting on the next corner, many would lose their nerve. Journeys would be abandoned, meetings postponed, errands left undone. The night would belong not to the ordinary folk, but to fear itself. He has seen how much difference a single lamp can make, how a woman walking alone will pause in a shadow and then step forward with steadier breath once she sees the flame ahead. If the lamps were gone, those steps would falter. Fear would grow bold where light once stood. In these moments of imagining, he realizes that the lamps are not small things at all. Though modest, though often overlooked, they hold back something vast and terrible, the endless dark. The people may not think of it, may pass beneath them without gratitude, but the lamplighter knows. He knows that without their glow, the city would be less a home and more a hollow. Their light is what makes the night human, what keeps it gentle, what keeps it from swallowing all that lives within it. There are nights when his step falters, when the pole feels heavier than usual and the chill air reminds him of the years that have already passed. In those moments, he thinks of his own impermanence, of the truth that one day his hands will no longer strike the flame or lift the pole. Yet when this thought comes, he does not feel sorrow. Instead, he finds comfort in knowing that the lamps will not end with him. Just as he once inherited the task from another, so too will someone else one day inherit it from him. The lamps will continue to glow, their quiet circles of light unfolding in the night long after his name has faded from memory. He often imagines that unknown future lamplighter walking the same streets, feeling the same cobblestones underfoot, listening to the same muffled hush of the night. Perhaps that man will pause at the same corners, tilt his head at the same stubborn lamps, smile at the same flickering glow by the river. The lamplighter wonders if the newcomer will feel the same bond he does, if he too will come to see the lamps not just as duty, but as companions. In this way, there is a chain across time, one keeper passing to another, not with words or ceremony, but with steady hands and silent care. He likes to think that even when he is gone, the lamps themselves will remember him, not in any living sense, but in the simple fact that his touch kept them alive through countless nights, his trimming, his oil, his patience, all of it folded into their endurance. Their continued glow is in part his legacy. Perhaps no one will ever know it, perhaps no passerby will whisper his name, but in every steady flame there will be a trace of him, of his devotion. That thought brings him peace. It is enough, he feels, to have added light to the world, even if the world never notices the hand that made it possible. Sometimes he imagines a far future when the city itself has changed, when its streets are broader, its houses taller, its people rushing in ways he cannot now imagine. Even then, he thinks, there will still be need for light. Perhaps the lamps will be different, brighter or stranger than the ones he tends now, but the principle will remain. Darkness will come, and someone will be needed to hold it back. He wonders if that far-off lamplighter, centuries ahead, will feel kinship with him across the gulf of time, for though their worlds may differ, their work will be the same, to guard the night with a humble flame. And as he walks, these thoughts settle into him, not as melancholy, but as a deep and soothing certainty. He is a part of something larger than himself, something that stretches beyond his years and outlasts his body. The lamps will endure, and others will care for them, just as he has. He is but a link in a chain, a quiet guardian who will one day be replaced, yet whose presence will never fully vanish. For as long as the lamps glow, so too will some small echo of his life. There are nights when the sky is clear, and as he makes his rounds, the lamplighter lifts his eyes from the cobblestones to the heavens. Above him, the stars lie scattered in their endless silence, 1,000 tiny flames hung far beyond reach. They remind him so much of the lamps below, each shining in its own small circle of night, each fragile, each vulnerable, and yet together forming a great tapestry of light. The stars and the lamps seem like companions, one set guiding the travellers of the earth, the other guiding the wanderers of the sky. He wonders sometimes if the stars watch him as he works, just as he watches them. When he pauses beneath their glow, it feels as though his small task is not so small after all. His lamps, when seen from above, might look like stars themselves, tiny constellations stitched into the streets, mirroring the constellations that hang above. There is comfort in this thought, that the world is not divided, but joined, the heavens lending their light to the earth, and the earth answering in kind. The lamplighter imagines that those who came before him, generations ago, must also have looked up at the same sky. Perhaps they too saw this kinship between the lamps they tended and the stars that never fail. Perhaps even in distant lands, where strangers walk streets he will never see, there are lamplighters doing the same as he, lifting their poles, striking their flames, glancing upward to find the familiar company of the night sky. The thought fills him with a quiet kinship, not just across time, but across the world. Light, he thinks, is a language understood by all. And so, with each lamp he tends, he feels he is weaving his part of a great pattern, a pattern of guardianship, of humble flames rising against the dark, from the smallest wick on the street to the grandest star in the heavens. Together they whisper a single message: that light is always worth keeping, always worth passing on, no matter how small. And so, as the lamplighter lowers his pole for the final time that evening, the city rests beneath its blanket of stars and lamps alike. The streets are calm, the windows drowsy, the air thick with quiet. Somewhere above, the constellations continue their endless vigil. Somewhere below, the flames he has tended hold their circles against the dark. His work, though simple, carries with it the rhythm of the universe itself, small lights standing bravely against the vastness of night. And as you listen, perhaps you too can feel the calm of his world, the steady glow, the patient footsteps, the soft reassurance that light will always be tended, that the night is never fully empty. Let the thought linger with you like a lamp at your own bedside, steady, gentle, and enduring. Rest now in the company of stars and lamps, and know that both will watch over you until morning comes.